I told myself it was just one conversation, one last chapter I had to close. But I chose my ex on the same night I was supposed to choose my husband, and that humiliation couldn't be explained away. When my husband found out, he didn't yell, he just walked away. That silence was the moment I realized I'd shattered something permanent. The wedding had been perfect. Everyone said so. The flowers, the dress, the venue, everything had fallen into place, like pieces of a puzzle I'd been working on for 2 years. But as I stood in our bedroom at midnight, still in my reception dress, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Caleb was in the bathroom, methodically removing his cufflinks with the same careful precision he brought to everything. Math teacher, chess player, the kind of man who folded his socks into perfect squares. I loved that about him once. Tonight, it felt suffocating. My phone buzzed. Darren's name lit up the screen. Saw the photos online. You looked beautiful today. Happy for you. I should have deleted it. Should have turned off my phone and focused on my new husband. Instead, I found myself typing back. Thank you. It was a long day. I bet. How are you feeling? How was I feeling? Married, committed, trapped. No, that wasn't fair to Caleb. He was a good man, safe, reliable, everything Darren had never been. Honestly, a little overwhelmed. Want to talk about it? I'm at the Midtown Hotel for a conference. Could meet you in the lobby bar if you need someone to listen. I stared at the message for a full minute. Caleb emerged from the bathroom in his pajamas, already looking half asleep. Everything okay? He asked, noticing my expression. Just checking messages from the wedding, I lied smoothly. Sarah's thanking us for including her kids in the ceremony. He nodded, already distracted by his phone. Work emails, probably, even on our wedding night. I think I need some air, I said suddenly. Maybe drive around for a bit, clear my head. Caleb looked up, confused. Now? It's almost 1 a.m. I know it sounds crazy, but I feel so wired. All that adrenaline from today, I won't be able to sleep. He studied my face for a moment, then shrugged. Okay, drive safe. Don't be too long. That should have been my first clue, that my husband of 6 hours was so disconnected, he didn't even question his bride wanting to leave their home alone at 1 a.m. 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Darren in the dimly lit hotel bar, still in my wedding dress. The irony wasn't lost on me. You actually came, he said, sliding a wine glass across the table. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure either. I took a sip, feeling the alcohol warm my chest. This is insane, isn't it? Maybe. But you needed closure, right? We never really talked after everything ended. Closure. Yes, that's what this was. A perfectly reasonable thing for a mature adult to seek. Not betrayal, not cheating, just closure. I keep thinking about what we had, I admitted, whether I made the right choice. Darren leaned forward, his eyes intense in the way that had always made my heart race. You did what you thought was best. Caleb's a good guy, stable. But stable isn't everything, Ivy. You're not the type of person who wants to live in a perfectly organized box for the rest of your life. He was right. That's exactly how I felt, boxed in, categorized, filed away under wife, like one of Caleb's lesson plans. We talked for 2 hours, about our relationship, about the passion we'd shared, about the future I was walking into. Darren didn't try to convince me to leave Caleb. He was too smart for that. Instead, he just listened, validated my feelings, reminded me of who I used to be before I became half of a couple. When he walked me to my car, he kissed my cheek. Nothing more. But the way his hand lingered on my waist, the way he looked at me like I was still the most fascinating woman in the world, it was everything Caleb's dutiful goodnight kisses weren't. Take care of yourself, Ivy, he whispered. You deserve to be happy. I drove home in a daze, the hotel receipt crumpled in my purse like evidence of a crime. But what crime? I'd had a conversation with an old friend. That's all. Perfectly innocent. Caleb was awake when I slipped back into bed at 4 a.m. He didn't say anything, just watched me with those dark, unreadable eyes as I fumbled with my jewelry in the darkness. "Good drive?" he asked finally. "Yeah, really helped clear my head." He nodded slowly, then rolled over to face the wall, but I could feel him lying there, awake, thinking. The silence stretched between us like a chasm I'd somehow created without meaning to. I deleted Darren's messages before falling asleep, but I couldn't delete the feeling that I'd just made a terrible mistake. Or maybe the terrible mistake was marrying Caleb in the first place. Sunday brunch at the Hartley house was a tradition I'd grown to dread even before the wedding. Caleb's family had a way of making every gathering feel like a performance review, and today I was especially not in the mood. Eleanor, Caleb's mother, had outdone herself with the spread: fresh fruit, homemade quiche, artisanal coffee, the kind of effortless perfection that reminded me why I'd never quite fit into their world. "So, how are the newlyweds adjusting?" asked Lydia, Caleb's younger sister, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. At 25, she had the confidence of someone who'd never made a serious mistake in her life. "Oh, you know how it is," I laughed, cutting into my quiche. Still getting used to saying husband instead of boyfriend. It's surreal. Caleb sat beside me, quieter than usual. He'd been distant all week, working late, spending extra time grading papers. Wedding stress, I'd told myself. Perfectly normal. "Any interesting honeymoon plans?" Richard, Caleb's father, asked. He was a retired accountant who treated every conversation like a tax audit. "We're thinking about postponing for a few months," Caleb said. "Work commitments." "That's practical," Eleanor murmured, though she looked disappointed. "Actually," I said, feeling suddenly reckless, "I had the funniest thing happen after the wedding. You know how brides get all emotional and nostalgic? I ended up meeting my ex-boyfriend for coffee to get some closure. Can you believe that? On my wedding night?" The silence that followed was deafening. Lydia's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Richard's coffee cup froze in midair. Even Eleanor, master of social grace, looked stunned. "You did what?" Lydia finally asked. I know, it sounds crazy. But you know how it is. Sometimes you need to close one chapter before you can fully open another. It was totally innocent, just two old friends talking." "On your wedding night," Richard repeated slowly. "Well, technically it was early morning, around 1 a.m. I couldn't sleep, and Darren was in town for a conference, so..." I trailed off, realizing how this sounded. Caleb was staring at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. His jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscle twitching. "Ivy," Eleanor said carefully, "that seems like rather unusual timing." "Does it? I thought it showed maturity. Like, look how evolved we all are. No drama, no jealousy. Just two adults having a conversation." "At a hotel bar," Caleb said quietly. "At 1 a.m., on our wedding night." Everyone turned to look at him. It was the first time he'd spoken since we'd arrived. "You knew about this?" Lydia asked him. "I knew she went out. I didn't know the details until now." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I felt heat rising in my cheeks, but I forced myself to laugh. "Oh, come on. You're all acting like I committed a crime. It was just coffee. Well, wine, technically, but the point stands. I needed closure. I got it. End of story." "Closure," Richard repeated like the word tasted bad. "Yes, closure. Some of us don't just flip a switch and stop caring about people who are important to us. Some of us process things differently." I was getting defensive, which wasn't the tone I'd wanted to strike, but their reactions were so over the top. It's not like I'd slept with Darren. We'd just talked. "I think," Eleanor said diplomatically, "that perhaps this is something you and Caleb should discuss privately." "There's nothing to discuss," I said firmly. "It happened, it's over, and now I can move forward with my marriage completely focused on my husband." Lydia snorted, actually snorted. "Something funny?" I asked. my voice sharper than intended. Just wondering if your definition of completely focused is different from everyone else's. Lydia, Eleanor warned. No, it's fine, I said, standing up. Clearly my honesty isn't appreciated here. I thought I was being mature by sharing this, but apparently some people would prefer secrets and lies. Actually, Lydia said, also standing, most people would prefer wives who don't sneak out to meet their exes on their wedding night. I didn't sneak anywhere. I told Caleb I was going out. You told him you needed air. You didn't mention the part about meeting another man. Caleb finally looked up at me, and something in his expression made my stomach clench. Not anger, something colder, more calculating. We should go, he said quietly. The drive home was silent except for the radio playing soft jazz that felt mocking in its cheerfulness. I kept glancing at Caleb, waiting for him to say something, anything. But he just drove, his hand steady on the wheel, his face expressionless. You're being ridiculous, I finally said as we pulled into our driveway. All of you. It was one conversation with someone I used to date. That's it. Okay, Caleb said. Okay? That's it? Just okay? He turned off the engine and looked at me. What do you want me to say, Ivy? I want you to acknowledge that you're overreacting. I want you to admit that meeting Darren was perfectly harmless. Was it? The question hung between us like a challenge. Was it harmless? Of course it was. We'd just talked. But the way Darren had looked at me, the way I'd felt sitting across from him, the way I'd thought about that night every day since. Yes, I said firmly. It was completely harmless. Caleb nodded slowly, then got out of the car without another word. I sat there for a moment, watching him walk toward our front door, and wondered when my husband had become a stranger. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation at brunch, the look on Lydia's face, the way Richard had said closure like it was profanity. They were all overreacting, making something innocent into something sordid. Around 2 a.m., I heard Caleb get up and go to his study. The soft sound of papers rustling drifted through the walls, followed by the quiet clicking of his laptop keyboard. Working late again. Or maybe not working at all. Maybe taking notes. Monday morning brought a rude awakening in the form of my boss, Janet, calling me into her office before I'd even had my first cup of coffee. Ivy, we need to talk, she said, closing the door behind me with more force than necessary. Janet was in her 50s, a no-nonsense marketing director who'd built her career on reading people and situations with laser precision. Right now, she was reading me like a book I didn't want opened. Is everything okay? I asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. That's what I'm trying to figure out. She turned her computer monitor toward me. This was sent to our general company email this morning. On the screen was a photo, grainy, clearly taken from a distance, but unmistakably me, sitting in the hotel bar with Darren, still in my wedding dress, leaning across the table in what looked like an intimate conversation. My blood turned to ice. I can explain, I started. I'm sure you can. But first, let me explain something to you. This company has a reputation to maintain. We work with family-oriented clients who expect their marketing partners to reflect their values. Janet, this isn't what it looks like. What it looks like is our newest married employee meeting with another man at a hotel bar on her wedding night. What it looks like is exactly the kind of scandal our clients don't want associated with their brands. I stared at the photo, trying to figure out who could have taken it. The hotel bar hadn't been crowded, but it wasn't empty either. Any number of people could have recognized me, especially since our wedding photos had been all over social media. It was completely innocent, I said. He's an old friend. We were just talking. At 2 a.m., in a hotel, while you were wearing your wedding dress. I needed closure. Ivy. Janet's voice cut through my explanation like a blade. I don't care what you needed. I care about what this looks like to our clients and colleagues. I'm putting you on probation pending a full review of your conduct. Probation for having a conversation. For exercising such poor judgment that it's now affecting your professional reputation and by extension ours. I left her office feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Probation. For what? For being honest about my feelings? For seeking the closure I needed to move forward in my marriage? The rest of the day was a nightmare of whispered conversations that stopped when I walked by, knowing looks from colleagues, and the growing realization that somehow my private business had become public entertainment. At lunch, I called my mother. "Mum, I need to talk to someone sane," I said, finding a quiet corner of the parking lot. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" I told her everything, the meeting with Darren, the disaster at brunch, the photo at work. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. "Oh, honey," she said when I finished, "you really stepped in it this time." "Mom." "What? You want me to lie? Meeting your ex-boyfriend at a hotel on your wedding night was incredibly stupid. Not you, too. I thought you'd understand. I understand that you're 28 years old, and sometimes 28-year-olds do incredibly stupid things. But that doesn't make it less stupid. It wasn't stupid. It was closure. Closure is something you find within yourself, Ivy, not something you get from sneaking around with your ex-husband's competition. Darren isn't Caleb's competition. Isn't he? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you chose Darren over Caleb on the night you were supposed to be celebrating choosing Caleb forever. I hung up on her. That evening, Caleb came home later than usual. I was in the kitchen, stress-eating leftover wedding cake and scrolling through social media, where our wedding photos were still getting likes and comments from people who had no idea about the drama unfolding behind the scenes. "How was work?" he asked, setting his briefcase down with his usual methodical care. "Terrible. Someone sent a photo of me and Darren to my boss. I'm on probation." Caleb paused in the act of loosening his tie. "A photo?" "From the hotel bar. Someone must have recognized me and decided to cause trouble." He resumed undressing, hanging his tie on the designated hook, placing his shoes in their designated spot. "That's it. Just, What do you want me to say?" "I want you to be upset that someone is trying to sabotage my career over something completely innocent." Caleb turned to look at me, and again I saw that calculating expression that made my skin crawl. "Is that what you think this is? Someone trying to sabotage you? What else would it be?" "Maybe it's consequences, Ivy. Maybe it's what happens when you make choices that affect more than just yourself." "Consequences for what? Having a conversation?" "For lying to your husband on your wedding night, for meeting another man at a hotel, for being so cavalier about it that you bragged about it at family brunch like it was some kind of joke." His voice was calm, level, but there was steel underneath that I'd never heard before. "I didn't lie. You told me you needed air. You told me you were going for a drive. You didn't mention Darren until yesterday. Because I knew you'd overreact, just like you're doing now." "I'm not overreacting, Ivy. I'm processing. I'm trying to understand why my wife of 1 week thought it was appropriate to seek emotional intimacy with another man instead of talking to me." "It wasn't emotional intimacy. What would you call it?" I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it, because what had it been? What do you call sitting in a dimly lit bar with your ex-boyfriend, sharing your fears and doubts about your marriage, feeling more understood in 2 hours than you had in months with your husband? "I call it closure," I said finally. Caleb nodded slowly. "Okay, then I guess we have different definitions of marriage." He walked upstairs, leaving me alone with the wedding cake and the growing realization that this wasn't going away. This wasn't something I could laugh off, or explain away, or wait for people to forget. This was just the beginning. The next few weeks were a masterclass in how quickly a life can unravel. It started with small things, friends taking longer to respond to texts, invitations that didn't come, conversations that felt stilted and strange. Then came the bigger things. My sister Lynn called on a Thursday evening while I was trying to work from home, having been effectively banished from the office pending my conduct review. "Ivy, we need to talk," she said without preamble. "If this is about the hotel thing, it's about the hotel thing, and the way you've been handling it, and the fact that you seem to think this is all just going to blow over." I set down my laptop and rubbed my temples. "What do you want me to say, Lynn? I made a mistake. I've acknowledged that." "Have you? Because from what I'm hearing, you're still calling it closure and acting like everyone else is crazy for being upset." "Everyone else is crazy for being upset. It was one conversation." "Jesus, Ivy, listen to yourself. You're married. You snuck out on your wedding night to meet your ex-boyfriend at a hotel. How is everyone else the problem here?" "I didn't sneak. You lied to Caleb about where you were going and who you were meeting. That's sneaking." I was quiet for a moment, staring out the window at our perfectly manicured suburban street. When had my life become so small, so predictable? When had I become the kind of person who lived on a street where all the mailboxes matched? "Do you ever feel trapped, Lynn?" I asked. "What?" "Trapped, like you made all these choices that seemed right at the time, but now you're stuck living a life that doesn't fit anymore." "Are we talking about your marriage or your decision to cheat on your husband?" "I didn't cheat. Emotionally, you did, and you know it." The accusation hung between us like a physical thing. Emotional cheating. Was that what I'd done? It felt too simple, too neat. What Darren and I had shared was more complex than that. "I think," I said carefully, "that I'm allowed to have feelings. I'm allowed to process the end of one relationship before fully committing to another." "You got married, Ivy. The time for processing was before you walked down the aisle." "Says who?" "Says some arbitrary timeline that society made up. Maybe I needed to see Darren one more time to realize that Caleb was the right choice." "And did you realize that?" The question caught me off guard. Had I? Sitting across from Darren, feeling that familiar spark, remembering what it was like to be with someone who found me fascinating instead of just manageable. Had that convinced me I'd chosen correctly? "Yes," I lied. "Of course." "Then why haven't you apologized to Caleb?" "I have apologized." "You've explained, you've justified, you've rationalized, but have you actually said, 'I'm sorry, I was wrong, it won't happen again'?" I hadn't, because I wasn't sure I was wrong. Confused, maybe. Impulsive, definitely. But wrong? That implied I'd done something immoral, and I couldn't accept that. "I'm not going to apologize for seeking closure," I said. "Then you're going to lose your husband." "If Caleb can't handle the fact that I have a past—" "This isn't about your past, Ivy. This is about your present. This is about the choice you made as a married woman to prioritize another man's feelings over your husband's." After she hung up, I sat in the silence of our empty house and tried to figure out when everyone in my life had become so judgmental, so rigid, so incapable of understanding that sometimes people needed to do things that didn't fit neatly into society's little boxes. Caleb came home around 8, carrying takeout from the Thai place we used to go to when we were dating. A peace offering, maybe. "How was your day?" he asked, setting the food on the kitchen counter. "Fine. Lynn called." "How is she?" "Disappointed in me, like everyone else." Caleb was quiet for a moment, unpacking containers of pad thai and green curry with the same methodical care he brought to everything. "Maybe," he said finally. "They're not disappointed in you. Maybe they're disappointed for you." "What's that supposed to mean?" "Maybe they're watching someone they care about make choices that are going to hurt her, and they don't know how to stop it." I stared at him. "You think I'm hurting myself?" "I think you're so focused on justifying what you did that you can't see what you're losing." "What am I losing?" He looked at me with those dark, serious eyes that had first attracted me to him. "Everything, Ivy. You're losing everything." That night, I found myself scrolling through old photos on my phone. Pictures of Caleb and me from our early dating days. when everything felt easy and right. Pictures from our engagement party, where I looked genuinely happy. Pictures from our wedding, where I looked, what? Beautiful, yes. Radiant, maybe, but happy. I stared at a photo of Caleb and me during our first dance and tried to remember what I'd been thinking in that moment. Had I been thinking about him? About our future? Or had I already been thinking about Darren? About the conversation I was planning to have? About the closure I thought I needed? I deleted the photo. Then I deleted another one. And another. By the time I finished, I'd deleted every photo from our wedding day, as if erasing the evidence could erase the choices I'd made. But the hotel receipt was still in my purse, crumpled and forgotten. And somewhere out there, someone still had that photo of me and Darren, and they were still deciding what to do with it. And Caleb was still taking notes. 3 weeks after the wedding, I came home to find Caleb in his study, surrounded by papers and manila folders. The sight made my stomach clench with the anxiety I couldn't quite name. "What's all this?" I asked, leaning against the door frame. "Just organizing some things," he said without looking up. "Insurance papers, bank statements, that sort of thing." "Since when do you organize insurance papers at 9 p.m.? Since I realized how disorganized our filing system is, we should probably set up separate accounts for some things. Make sure everything's properly documented." Something in his tone made me step closer. The papers spread across his desk weren't just insurance documents. I could see phone bills, credit card statements, printed emails. "Caleb, what is this really about?" He finally looked up at me, and his expression was unreadable. "It's about being prepared, Ivy. It's about making sure all our affairs are in order." "Affairs? That's an interesting choice of words." "Is it?" We stared at each other for a long moment. There was something happening here, some subtext I couldn't quite grasp. But before I could push further, his phone rang. "I need to take this," he said, glancing at the screen. "It's work." But as he answered, I caught a glimpse of the caller ID. It wasn't the school. It was a name I didn't recognize, followed by attorney at law. I went to bed that night with a growing sense of unease. Caleb stayed in his study until well after midnight, and when he finally came to bed, he was careful not to wake me. Or maybe he was just careful not to touch me. The next morning, I decided to take action. I couldn't keep living in this strange limbo where my husband treated me like a stranger and everyone else treated me like a pariah. I needed to fix this. I called Darren. "Ivy? Is everything okay?" "Not really. The whole hotel thing has become this huge drama. People are acting like we committed some kind of crime." "I'm sorry to hear that. I never meant for you to get in trouble." "I know, it's not your fault. People are just small-minded." "How's Caleb handling it?" "Badly. He's being cold and distant, organizing papers like he's preparing for something." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Ivy, maybe you should talk to a lawyer." "A lawyer? Why would I need a lawyer?" "Just, if he's organizing financial documents and acting strange, maybe he's preparing for something you should be prepared for too." The suggestion sent a chill through me. "You think he's planning to leave me?" "I think you should protect yourself, just in case." After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen staring at the walls Caleb and I had painted together last spring. Pale yellow, because I'd said it would make the room feel sunny. He'd spent an entire weekend carefully taping edges and applying primer, even though he'd wanted to hire professionals. Was he really planning to leave me, over one conversation with my ex? It seemed so extreme, so disproportionate to what had actually happened. That afternoon, I drove to my mother's house. I needed someone on my side, someone who would remind me that I wasn't crazy or evil, or any of the other things people seem to think. "Mom, I think Caleb might be planning to divorce me," I said without preamble. She looked up from her gardening, dirt-stained gloves frozen in the act of planting bulbs. "What makes you think that?" I told her about the papers, the phone call, the way he'd been acting. She listened without interrupting, but her expression grew more troubled with each detail. "Honey," she said finally, "maybe it's time to consider that you might have made a bigger mistake than you want to admit." "Mom, no, listen to me. I've been thinking about this for weeks. You married a good man, a stable, decent man who loved you enough to plan a beautiful wedding and commit his life to you. And on the night he should have been the most important person in your world, you chose to spend time with someone else. It was just closure. Stop saying that." Her voice was sharper than I'd ever heard it. "Stop hiding behind that word, like it makes what you did okay. You emotionally betrayed your husband on your wedding night, and now you're surprised that there are consequences." I stared at her, feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. My mother was supposed to be on my side. She was supposed to understand. "I can't believe you're taking his side," I said. "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm trying to help you see reality before it's too late." "What reality?" "The reality that you're about to lose something precious because you're too proud to admit you were wrong." I left her house feeling more alone than ever. Even my own mother had turned against me. Even she couldn't see that what I'd done was understandable, human, forgivable. That evening, Caleb came home with flowers. Daisies, my favorite. For a moment, I felt a surge of hope. Maybe he was ready to move past this. Maybe we could start over. "What are these for?" I asked, accepting the bouquet. "No reason. Just thought you might like them." His tone was pleasant, almost cheerful. But there was something underneath it that made me nervous. Something too controlled, too careful. "Caleb, can we talk? Really talk? About everything that's happened?" "Of course. What did you want to discuss?" "I want to discuss the fact that you've been treating me like a stranger for 3 weeks. I want to discuss the papers on your desk, and the phone calls from lawyers, and the way you look at me like you're solving a math problem." He was quiet for a moment, arranging the flowers in a vase with the same precision he brought to everything. "I've been thinking," he said finally, "about what you said at brunch, about closure." "Okay. And I realized you were right. Sometimes people do need closure before they can move forward." Something in his tone made my skin prickle. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe I need some closure too. Maybe I need to understand exactly what happened that night before I can decide how to move forward." "I told you what happened. We talked. That's all." "I know that's what you told me, but I think there might be more to the story." He turned to look at me, and his expression was calm, almost pleasant. But his eyes were cold as winter. "So I've been doing some research, gathering information, making sure I have all the facts before I make any decisions about our future." The flowers in my hand suddenly felt like a funeral arrangement. "What kind of research?" "The thorough kind," he said, "the kind that leaves no room for doubt." That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe beside me and wondered what exactly he'd found, what facts he thought he had, what decisions he was planning to make, but I was about to find out. I should have known something was wrong when I came home to find the house too quiet. Not empty quiet, but carefully quiet, like someone had methodically removed the sounds of life. Caleb's coffee mug wasn't in the sink, his laptop wasn't on the kitchen counter, his jacket wasn't hanging on the back of his chair. I climbed the stairs with growing dread, calling his name even though I somehow knew he wouldn't answer. Our bedroom looked normal at first glance, but then I noticed the details. His dresser drawers were slightly ajar. The closet door was open, revealing gaps where his clothes used to hang. On my pillow was an envelope with my full name typed across the front, Ivadne Margaret Greer Hartley. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a key. "Ivy," it read in Caleb's precise handwriting, "I've moved out temporarily while we work through some things. The key is to a storage unit where you'll find some items I thought you should see. Unit 247 at Secure Store on Maple Street. I think it's time we both had complete closure. Caleb." My hands were shaking as I drove to the storage facility. The key felt heavy in my palm, like it was made of something denser than metal. Something that would sink straight to the bottom if I dropped it. Unit 247 was small, maybe 10 feet by 10 feet, but it was meticulously organized, because of course it was. Caleb had arranged everything like an exhibit in a museum of my betrayal. On one wall hung a timeline, printed on poster board with dates and times marked in red ink. Our wedding day, the night I met Darren, the morning after. Every lie I'd told, every half-truth, every omission, marked and documented like evidence in a criminal trial. Below the timeline were boxes, each one labeled in Caleb's neat handwriting: phone records, credit card statements, hotel documentation, social media screenshots, witness statements. I opened the first box with trembling fingers. Inside were printed copies of every text message I'd sent and received in the past month. Not just the ones with Darren, though those were highlighted in yellow, but conversations with my mother, my sister, my friends, all of them discussing the hotel incident, as everyone had started calling it. The Darren messages were the worst, not because they were explicitly romantic, but because they showed a level of emotional intimacy that I'd never achieved with my own husband. Late-night conversations about feeling trapped, discussions about passion versus security, messages where he called me fascinating and I called him the only person who really understands me. Messages I didn't even remember sending. Messages that, read all together, told the story of a woman who had married the wrong man and was slowly realizing it. The second box contained credit card statements with my hotel bar tab highlighted, along with printed receipts showing exactly what I'd ordered and when. 2 glasses of wine, charged to the room of someone named D. Mallory. Darren had paid for my drinks. My wedding night drinks with my ex-boyfriend had been charged to his hotel room. The third box was the worst. Hotel security footage, somehow obtained, showing me and Darren entering and leaving the bar. Time-stamped photos that proved I'd been there for over 2 hours. And one more photo I'd never seen. Darren walking me to my car, his hand on my waist, leaning in to kiss my cheek. In the photo, I was smiling. Not the polite, social smile I gave to acquaintances, but the real smile I'd forgotten I was capable of. The smile of a woman who felt alive. The fourth box contained screenshots of every social media post I'd made since the wedding. My gushing posts about married life, my photos of flowers Caleb had brought me, my carefully crafted image of wedded bliss, all of it annotated with timestamps showing when I'd been messaging Darren at the same time. The final box was the one that broke me. Witness statements, actual printed statements from people who'd seen me at the hotel, people who'd recognized me, people who'd taken photos, but also statements from friends and family members about conversations they'd had with me. Things I'd said about feeling trapped, things I'd said about Caleb being boring, things I'd said about wondering if I'd made a mistake. All of it documented, all of it organized, all of it proving that my innocent conversation for closure was actually the culmination of months of emotional distance from my husband and growing reconnection with my ex. At the bottom of the box was a letter addressed to me. "Ivy," it began, "I want you to know that I don't hate you. I don't even blame you entirely. I think you married me because I was safe, and I think you've been regretting that choice for longer than either of us wants to admit. What I can't forgive is the lying. Not just about the hotel, but about everything. About being happy. About wanting to be married to me. About feeling trapped and bored and like you settled for less than you deserved. I've filed for divorce. The papers will be served tomorrow. I've documented everything because I wanted you to see the truth of what happened, not the version you've been telling yourself. You didn't seek closure, Ivy. You sought an escape. And you found one. I hope you and Darren are very happy together. You deserve each other. The storage unit is paid for through the end of the month. After that, you can do whatever you want with the contents. Don't contact me unless it's through lawyers. Caleb, P.S. I've changed the locks. Your things are packed and in the garage. The garage code is your birthday." I sat on the concrete floor of that storage unit and cried until I had nothing left. Not because I was losing Caleb, though I was. Not because I was losing my marriage, though I was. But because looking at all that evidence, all that documentation, I finally saw the truth. I had been lying. To him, to everyone, but mostly to myself. I hadn't sought closure. I had sought permission. Permission to leave. Permission to choose passion over security. Permission to admit that I'd married the wrong man. And in seeking that permission, I'd destroyed any chance of building something real with the right man. My phone buzzed. A text from Darren. Heard about the divorce. I'm sorry. If you need someone to talk to, I'm here. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I deleted it without responding. Some closure, I'd finally learned, comes too late to matter. The next morning, I found the divorce papers on my doorstep, along with a manila envelope containing copies of everything from the storage unit. Caleb had made sure I'd have my own set of evidence, my own record of how thoroughly I'd destroyed my life in pursuit of something I'd convinced myself I needed. I signed the papers that afternoon. 3 months later, I was living in a studio apartment across town, working part-time at a job that barely paid my bills, and learning what it felt like to be truly alone. Darren had stopped returning my calls after the second week. Apparently, the idea of me was more appealing than the reality. My mother spoke to me again, eventually. My sister took longer. Caleb's family never did. And Caleb, I saw him once at the grocery store, 6 months after the divorce was finalized. He was with a woman I didn't recognize. A teacher from his school, I learned later. She was laughing at something he'd said, looking at him like he was the most interesting man in the world. He saw me too, across the produce section. For a moment, our eyes met, and I thought about walking over. Thought about apologizing, thought about trying to explain. But then I remembered the storage unit, the documentation, the methodical way he'd collected evidence of my betrayal while I was still pretending it was innocent. I remembered that Caleb had never been the boring one in our relationship. He'd been the smart one. And I'd been too stupid to realize it until it was too late. I told myself I was seeking closure when I went to that hotel. But what I found instead was the end of everything I'd thought I wanted, and the beginning of understanding what I'd actually lost. Some mistakes you make in a moment, others you make over months, one small choice at a time, until you wake up one day and realize you've destroyed your life while trying to improve it. I chose my ex on the night I was supposed to choose my husband forever, and my husband, being smarter than I'd ever given him credit for, chose to walk away with his dignity intact. That silence, that methodical documentation, that calm preparation for a life without me, it was the moment I realized I'd shattered something permanent. And unlike my marriage, some things can't be fixed with explanations or justifications or claims of needing closure. Some things, once broken, stay broken forever.